Yes, thank you so much for having me on to present a case study on a piece of work that Macedon Ranges Shire did for 16 Days of Activism last year. I would like also just quickly to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from Tongarong country and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So for 16 Days of Activism, it falls into Macedon Ranges Shire's Tier 1 categories of recognition days that we adhere to and that we celebrate. So we have every year we have a reasonable program of things that happen during the 16 days, but we decided to do something a little different last year. This was partly because we had some feedback around a previous project that had been put together by council in another department, and also because of the councillor election period last year coming very close up against 16 days, it meant that we had to think slightly differently and a little out of the box as to what we were going to plan. So let me just, oops. It's been a while since I've used Zoom, beg your pardon. There we go, first slide. Oops. So our goal in this project was that we didn't have a public facing activity that like a collective activity planned. So we wanted, because we weren't going to do the walk against violence, which we would normally do because of the caretaker period causing some issues there. So we wanted to have another a format event that could engage the public. We were looking particularly at driving behaviour change through, pardon me, through the rigid, challenging the rigid gender stereotyping key driver of violence against women and male violence. So that was our goal. We wanted to do something that engaged broadly across the Shire, but also was around driving behaviour change. So in our planning, we had to think quite carefully about how we were going to do this, how we were going to word things. As I said, the project model was adapted from a photo competition that had been run for International Day for People with a Disability. It was a much smaller project that ran in 2023. We wanted to take it bigger than that, and we also wanted to get a really broad sweep across the community. And we spent quite a bit of time looking at how we were going to encourage those entries to really hit the mark for what we needed. So the wording that we came up with was that we wanted members of the public to send in images that show how we all live, work and play. So that was our key criteria in terms of location and place-based activity, outside of restrictive gender norms, where men can be gentle and caring, women can be strong and lead, and gender diverse or non-binary people can be active and visible in typically gendered spaces. We didn't want to be too prescriptive, but we felt we had to be somewhat prescriptive in order to really drive home the message. And then the format of the competition, we needed to work quite far back in terms of our planning. This wasn't something that could be sort of thrown together at the last minute, because we really had to map it out quite carefully in terms of giving people enough time to understand and interpret the message, take the photographs, upload the photographs, and conduct all the shortlisting. So we sort of had a 4-week period for a call for entries, which took place in October. So we were working quite far back from the actual 16 days. Those images were then shortlisted, printed and mounted. We displayed them from 25th of, in fact, I think we went slightly early. We probably put them up just the weekend before 16 days started. And then they also stayed up a little bit beyond the 10th of December. We also, we had them in an online sort of gallery that could be viewed as well. And we had a judging panel of professional photographers, then followed by an award presentation and celebration event, and then finally a sort of online component of People's Choice voting, which was announced at the end. So there are lots and lots and lots of moving parts. And it took a fair bit of planning and coordination with our internal comms team and other teams, particularly our youth team. We were very involved to actually get this all happening together. And of course, our partners. And so Macedon Ranges Shire partners every year. We have a little working kind of group every year that works together for 16 days. And so that is with Sunbury and Coburg Community Health, Zonta Club of Kyneton, and Macedon Ranges Health. And we also tap into our schools wellbeing network and a couple of other strategic networks as well. So there was a lot of people working very hard on this. It was for such a big project. We had almost no budget, so this made it interesting. And we were successful in achieving a safe and equal grant towards this project, which was incredibly helpful. As you can see from the breakdown there, it really wouldn't have happened without those contributions. And we also had a very generous contribution from our partner, Sunbury and Coburg Community Health, and very importantly, strong in-kind contribution from a local business, the local framers, who, again, we wouldn't have been able to put this project together the way we did without those strong partnerships and strong relationships. And you can see council's own people budget contribution was a relative drop in the ocean, but that's what we had available, and we were sort of scrabbling around for that. So it was a very low cost project, but high impact for what we were contributing. So I'll jump straight into some of the key challenges around this project. I mean, there were many, many challenges, not least of which we didn't really know until we opened it to the public what kind of images we were going to get submitted. It was very unknown in a lot of those respects. We didn't know how many people were going to submit. We didn't know how many pictures would get shortlisted and would need to be printed. But there was a lot of unknown factors at play in this. It was very important early on that we wanted to have a local venue with high foot traffic and publicly accessible to display the photographs. And we spent a very long time looking in Macedon Ranges Shire for a venue that ticked all those boxes. Initially, we had wanted to partner with the libraries, and they were very keen to partner to display the images, but libraries are very short on space. And when we actually had 15 shortlisted photographs, all sort of slightly bigger than A3 size. So finding a venue that could host all of the photos in one place was very tricky. And then the idea of breaking them up across the Shire was also potentially wouldn't show the impact of all of the images together. It was a little tricky for us to work out how we would divide them and split them across multiple venues. So we worked in partnership with a local cafe here in Kyneton, the Social Foundry, which is a cafe that is also a social enterprise, has very strong community values at its heart. They work quite closely with Sunbury and Coburg and Zonta Club of Kyneton to put on events, and frequently during the 16 days. So they've been a previous partner in the 16 days. So they seem to very they were like a number one choice, really, when it came to a space that would be able to put up all the photographs and would be central and local and drive lots of foot traffic through. However, we ran into a little sticky situation on the actual day that we were hanging all of the shortlisted photographs. So the main challenge around this was really timing as much as anything else, which was that they had a moment where they really decided they didn't want to have one of the photos included. It's the photograph that you can see on your screen. Now, this submission met all of our criteria for shortlisting in the exhibition and in the competition. So we were placed suddenly in a very tricky position where they didn't want to have it in the space, and it was absolutely critical to us that it stay in the the online exhibition, the public exhibition, and part of the competition. So we had to very quickly scramble and work together to have some negotiations with the venue. We were able to work very closely with our partners in this respect, so particularly leveraging our relationship with Sunbury and Coburg Community Health, who, like I said, run other programs that use the Social Foundry as a venue. We felt very clear around the decision that the photograph was absolutely to be included in the exhibition, because we had set up at the beginning of our planning, we had set in place terms of reference, guidelines, and selection criteria that we were meeting. So it wasn't just an arbitrary decision. It was very clearly met all of those criteria. And basically it came down to a discussion that was around values. And we luckily all together were able to place the strong kind of community values and emphasis on community well-being that all three, the venue, Sunbury, Cobalt and Macedon Ranges Shire all had as key priorities with this particular project. And then they were able to come to the party and they were happy to have the photograph included in the end, which was, so it was all a little hectic and it was all happening over a very short, like one day. But those negotiations were really, really important in terms of applying the learnings and the understanding around how to manage backlash. It was unexpected, so we were really sort of thrown had to think on our feet in this respect. We had incredible support, I will say, from Hayley and from Women's Health Loddon Mallee, and also through the other 16 days key organisations, Safe and Equal and Respect Victoria, but particularly the toolkit that Women's Health Loddon Mallee produced and the strategies around backlash were really important in this conversation. We were also able to provide then some further support to the venue in terms of scripts that were provided to staff, and lots of kind of management of feedback around with the community, directing it back to the project team. So that was back to myself and back to Rani at Sunbury and Cobalt Community Health to be responsible for any backlash that should come from customers. In the end, there wasn't any, but we felt that everybody felt well supported to be able to continue at that point. So it was ultimately a very positive outcome. It was extremely positive for the photographer, the person who had submitted that image, that they felt very well advocated for, very well supported. I think they felt an improved trust with their local council because we were so strongly supportive of their inclusion in this competition. And just quickly, I don't want to take up too much time, but basically the learnings and opportunities were very rich coming out of this project. We had a lot of youth engagement. We had, I think, 6 youth entries out of 15. I think 5 were shortlisted, and lots of young people came to the opening, which for a Thursday afternoon in Kyneton, that was pretty cool. We were happy with that. One learning was that we had reports back from young people that they didn't actually have access to the sort of digital cameras that they would like to use to submit entries. And so we're planning workshops this year to facilitate that. We thought young people all have phones. We didn't think about access to equipment, but that was quite strong feedback that came to us. So we will be working to support that this year. The online voting was the other component that worked incredibly well. We had 110 individual votes counted as everybody jumped on board to vote for their friends and their family and their favorite images. And so, and by the way, the previous image that I just showed you, that was the People's Choice winner and also the youth category winner. So we were very pleased that it did get included in the end because it swept the awards board. The other thing that we hadn't perhaps anticipated was that we asked entrants to provide a written description of their photo and how it responds to the question of challenging rigid and harmful gender stereotypes, and the very, very moving descriptions that were submitted with the photographs were just they enriched the experience so strongly. So we will definitely be working with that and see whether or not we can take some of those first person stories and do something a little bit more with those this year, because it was unexpected, but it was a real bonus. We also developed some potential partnerships with new community groups that work specifically in the gender equity space and the kind of creativity space in the Macedon Ranges. So that was a real bonus that we hadn't perhaps anticipated. And then, of course, there's an opportunity here. We've had lots of interest from other LGAs to scale this project beyond the Macedon Ranges Shire. So lots of fruitful things came out of this rather experimental exhibition that we put together. And this photograph, by the way, was the winner in the adult category. So I'm just going to finish at this point with what we felt was one of the real sort of most uplifting and positive outcomes that came from the exhibition. One of our judges, we had 3 judges, the fabulous Ciel, who I believe is no longer with Women's Health Loddon Mallee, but we were very, very pleased to have CL as one of our judges. We had Mitch Navalis, who is a photographer and filmmaker, as one of our judges. And then we had council's photographer also stepping in to judge. So across those three people, we felt we had a good representation of people familiar with photography as a medium and people familiar with gender equity and the key issues that we were trying to address in this exhibition. So I don't know if you've had a minute to read that quote, but Mitch gave a fabulous speech at the opening, speaking very passionately and strongly around the importance of showing images like this in a cafe in a small regional town. This was exactly what we were aiming for with our in our planning. Was in terms of venues, it was really ideal for us because there was lots of opportunity for incidental engagement with that key driver of violence. And the one piece I think that we would like to improve for next year is around working a bit more with the visitors to the exhibition to get feedback on how that may have infiltrated their conversations a little bit. It's something that's a little unknowable at this point. But yeah, we were very, very pleased and very proud to have Mitch as a judge, and very passionate speech that they gave. And of course, the image got shared on social media. So that was also pretty exciting for us that it was an image that went out to the world, the broader world.